Greetings, comrades, and welcome back to another episode of the Comrade Cast. And I'm sure you guys know exactly what we're going to talk about. I had, once again, the worst timed episode of all time last week, releasing it on the day Joe Biden drops out of the race. That kind of shit always seems to happen to me. I just have the worst sense of timing on the planet. Those are the two things that I can always consistently rely upon to draw comments about people roasting me are my terrible sense of timing and my terrible pronunciation. At least with my pronunciation, about 50% of it is me just trolling, and then 50% of it is me just genuinely mispronouncing the word. And the things I will never ever reveal which is which. As I'm sure you've gathered, we're talking about the K-Dog, we're talking about Kamala, and what Joe Biden's departure and her likely position as the Democratic nominee going forward means. Let me just say, I am genuinely very happy about this. While I do think Kamala definitely has some serious weaknesses as a candidate, we're going to talk about that as we go into the show. She is vastly superior to Joe Biden. It's a massive improvement, and I couldn't be happier that Joe stepped out of the race. It was the right thing to do for everybody, including him. And the timing, of course, is very interesting, and that's another thing we're going to talk about because the timing does seem to be very much so decided upon what is going to do the most amount of damage to Republicans, and it feels like that's exactly what they've done here. Before we move on, there's one thing I'd really like to quickly say. There's obviously a lot of people that I myself watch, other YouTube content creators who talk about geopolitics, politics in general, economics, history, all that kind of stuff we like to talk about in the show. And I mentioned before, one of the guys who I like to follow is Vlad Vexler. He is a guy who spends a lot of his time talking about Russian politics and what's happening in Ukraine. But he did a video where he's talking about Joe Biden's, about what it means for Joe Biden stepping out and why he stepped down and that kind of stuff. But he said basically that Joe deserves some credit for stepping down and actually giving up power, because that's an extremely hard thing to do. Giving up that kind of power once you have it is not an easy thing to do. And I think among other people, like one guy, Blast from the Past, the Amazing Atheist, he did another video talking about Kamala coming into the ring. And he's like, I just finished this video talking about why Joe Biden was never going to drop out, why Joe Biden was going to stay in the race forever, because his stubbornness would prevent him from ever dropping out. He would never want to look weak against a guy like Trump, who he absolutely despises. And with that thinking, he thought that, yeah, there's no way Joe Biden's going to drop out. We're stuck with him. Thankfully, he was wrong. But I do have to admit that even though I wanted Joe to go, it seemed like for a long time that he was going to stay, that the dam was going to hold. But, eventually it just became too untenable for the guy. So good on him for doing the right thing, for actually stepping down. And I definitely think he deserves at least some credit for that. But now let's talk about Kamala for a little bit and what she offers to the ticket, how she's going to change the political race, because everything has changed again, right? This has been a real whirlwind in terms of politics. It's every 2 or 3 weeks, everything is changing. Historic shit is happening. People are getting shot at. People are dropping out. It's unreal. It's very difficult to keep up with what's happening, and I think a lot of people feel the same. So I don't think we're really going to know the full impact of this for a couple weeks. Wait for all the dust to settle. Wait for all the chaos to get sorted out. Because, yeah, it's just been a huge whiplash. But when it comes to Kamala herself, yeah, I want to talk about what potential strengths and weaknesses she has as a candidate. But I also want to talk a little bit about if she is going to be the nominee at all. Actually, let's start there by discussing the kind of speculation if she's actually going to be the nominee. I personally think it's extremely likely. The only way that she would not be the nominee going into the election is if she just spectacularly flamed out in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Right now, she's actually doing a lot better than I thought she was going to. She is so far exceeding my expectations. I'm not seeing a ton of evidence for that right now, but given the pace of change in this past couple weeks, who knows what can happen. She can just spectacularly flame out, just become totally disliked by the electorate. And if something like that happens, I do think that the Democrats are going to be like, well, she's out. We have this open convention coming up in August. We're going to try somebody else. But barring some sort of act of God, some sort of political mishap along those lines, I think it's very likely she's going to be the nominee. The one thing is, though, is that I think she should have to fight for it. I've been talking with a lot of people on the left who disagree with me on this one. I think having to have her fight for it, and at least it not be a total, complete coronation and just crowning her as the candidate, would behoove her moving into the election. But the thing is, though, I don't see anybody else on the Democratic side who could muster up the campaign to beat Donald Trump at this late hour. Part of Joe dropping out at this time basically ensures that Kamala will be the nominee. If he had done what he should have done, which is maybe say that I'm not running for another term in late 2023, that would give us all the time to actually have a nomination, to have a primary, to bring somebody forward, and then have them actually secure the nomination. But because we're at this late hour, we just don't have the time to do that. We don't have the time for someone to come out and be the very obvious successor to Kamala. They just don't exist right now. People have been throwing around guys like Gavin Newsom, and while I do think Gavin Newsom would be definitely a better candidate than Kamala, probably do better against Trump than she will. First off, I don't think he wants it. And second off, I think he kind of understands it's not really my time yet. I've got some other shit to do basically before I make the run of the presidency. And I'll be honest, I don't really like Gavin Newsom that much. I really don't like a lot of the Democratic Party because they stink of neoliberalism. And he is definitely the king neoliberal. Kamala is like the princess neoliberal. She's not the queen. That's probably like Hillary Clinton or Nancy Pelosi or something like that. But she's the princess of neoliberalism. So there's definitely that part about her that irks me. But that would irk me more about Gavin Newsom. A lot of people are suggesting Gretchen Whitmer. I think she would probably be the best candidate to go up against Trump. She's pretty unknown outside of Michigan. I think having a woman this time actually does better for the Democratic Party vis-a-vis Trump. I think the Republicans are basically doing everything they can to repel every woman from their party. So having a woman as your candidate, I think what's the word I'm looking for? Bait out a lot of the more extreme attacks from the right. And I think because Gretchen Whitmer has that solid reputation, she's still unknown, lots of room to grow. And personally, I think she's more likable than Kamala Harris. I think she would probably be the best candidate to go forward. Again, just without the time, without the energy, she can't really build an actual campaign machine in the time that we have before us, which really makes Kamala the obvious candidate. And another thing, and I do think that this is a little bit overblown, is that all of the money that has been donated to the Biden campaign, Harris can access that immediately. Doesn't have to go through any kind of legal snafus. Doesn't have to worry about paying more for ad spending on targeted advertisements. They can just take that money and run with it. And I do think that eventually another Democratic candidate that is, could get their hands on that treasure trove. It would just take sort of time and energy and running through the bureaucratic tape to get access to it. And again, with so little time to go before the election, every day counts. So having to waste time just to get your campaign funds, not the best. But speaking of money, Kamala has managed to really show up some incredibly strong numbers. Within 3 days, she has raised over $126 million. And a lot of this is actually from small donors. This surprisingly isn't from corporate conglomerates, although of course some of that money does come from corporate conglomerates. Like a big example was the Disney heiress was basically turning off the spigot until somebody besides Joe Biden was at the top of the ticket. Now we have somebody other than Joe Biden at the top of the ticket. Spigot's back on. So I do think there was like a little bit of that kind of like when you dam up a flow of water, right? And you start to get a big pool, you remove the dam and then the pool comes rushing through. I think that's what's happening. a little bit is that a lot of these corporate donors were like, we're not really going to waste our money on a campaign that doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. Now we have a campaign that seems like it's going places. Money's coming back in. Regardless, though, this is a huge amount of money, and it definitely shows that there's still a ton of enthusiasm on the Democratic side. It's just not for Joe Biden. It's for basically anybody but Joe Biden. But still, again, nothing to sneeze at, and that money is going to do a lot of good in swing states coming up between now and November. And here's the thing, is like, I don't necessarily think that people are excited about Kamala, more so that they are excited that they have a candidate that's not Joe Biden. They have a candidate that can actually articulate themselves. They have a candidate that actually seems to have a good head on their shoulders. This in and of itself is massively invigorating the Democratic Party, basically because that while Kamala, again, isn't the best candidate, she doesn't invigorate the left as much as someone else could. The thing is that the bar was so low with Joe Biden that just being able to get a little bit above that has gotten people spectacularly happy. All right, so let's see what we can tell from what polls we have available. Although I am going to say that I am very frustrated right now with how Real Clear Politics is doing this. Again, we like to go to Real Clear Politics because it's just our baseline. It's the one that we use to compare what's been happening before, what's been happening after, and so on and so forth. But something that is really pissing me off here about the way that they've done these averages is that we're looking here at the Real Clear Politics average for Trump versus Harris. Right now it has Trump +2, but what they have done here is that, for example, we see this ABC News/Washington Post poll that has Harris +2. Click on it. It's actually not Harris +2. It's, let me just see, make sure you guys can see it. Yeah, you can see that it's Joe Biden +2. We go to this one here, Emerson +6. We can see it's a national poll. Trump 46, Biden 43. So yeah, obviously this is not actually Trump versus Harris, a lot of these polls, because you can see these are done July 5th to the 9th, July 7th to the 8th. All of these are done substantially before Joe Biden drops out. So to have them messing up the average, to me, is very stupid. I don't see why Real Clear Politics would do that, because you're taking two different averages between two different candidates and mashing them together. You should drop all of the Trump versus Biden polls so we can actually start with a fresh slate and see what's going on. So regardless, we can see that this is obviously skewed because it hasn't taken into account the new reality. So I guess Real Clear Politics, they heard me bashing them and they said, you know what? Fuck you, bud. You can't access our site anymore. For whatever reason, like you say, I click here, won't work. No problem with any other website here. We'll go to USA Today. Keep yelling at me about my ad blocker, but you can see, yeah, everything works fine. But they don't want me to access their site and bash them anymore. My second favorite site to look at various election results and statistics, 270towin.com, has not updated with its new polls. Fuck it. I was a little bit worried about this because, again, we're fresh after Joe Biden dropping out. There's probably going to be a lot of time before all the statistics come together and stabilize. But yeah, it's just frustrating. The only thing is that we have seen from the polls that have come out, we have seen that Kamala is doing substantially better than Joe Biden. In some cases, she is tied with Trump. In some cases, she's beating Trump. And in some cases, she's still losing to Trump, but only within a couple points rather than 5 or 6 points, what we were looking at before. With that, I want to put a pin on that. We're going to talk a little bit about the strengths and weaknesses of Kamala as a candidate, and then we're going to end the show talking about the Republican response to Kamala and then wrap it up. All right, so we got a nice little picture of Kamala here, got our strengths and weaknesses. Start with our strengths, and then we'll go into her weaknesses. So we're going to go with the first and most obvious strength. She's not Joe Biden. Joe Biden was extremely unpopular at this point by everybody, whether you were on the right, whether you were on the left. You knew that it was time for him to go. Everybody wanted him to go. Nobody liked him. Nobody wanted to vote for him. And just having him not at the top of the ticket, again, it's been a huge boost of energy to the Democratic Party. I don't want to put like a strengths like can talk. That's what I mean by a lot of those. Like, she's not Joe Biden. Yeah, a lot of those are encompassed within that strength. So next up, like we talked about, she's got very strong fundraising. Seems like she can really get people out there, get people raising money for the Democratic Party. It's going to be a huge, massive advantage going into this combat with Donald Trump, who is also, when it comes to Republicans, is a very strong fundraiser. Democrats generally do better than Republicans when it comes to fundraising because they are able to engine a lot more support with smaller donors. However, Trump has been able to encourage a lot more smaller donors to give to Republicans, but it's certainly not enough to surpass what Kamala has been able to raise and what it seems like Kamala will continue to be able to raise. We're going to obviously be watching those fundraising numbers as they move into the future, but it doesn't seem like that's going to slow down anytime soon. So our next strength is that she injects some much needed energy into the Democratic Party. We were talking about in the last episode how like 70% of Democrats, something like that, were disappointed with their presidential nominee. We don't have any new polling yet to see what the difference would be, but just having that weight lifted off the shoulders, it is very clear that Joe Biden was an anchor around the Democratic Party's neck. Virtually every Democratic candidate polls higher than Joe Biden. And now that he is no longer weighing down the party, it's if you are exercising and you've got 50 pounds strapped to your legs or something like that, and then you take off the 50 pounds, right? You're going to feel like you're the fucking man. Like you have this huge burst of energy and strength. So next in a similar vein is that she shores up energy with the base. She does have some issues with the base, and we'll look at that in the weaknesses part. But overall, she's definitely doing a lot to shore up some of the aspects of the Democratic coalition, which were wavering a little bit with Joe. The demographics like young people, black people, and Muslim Americans as well were definitely not happy with Joe. Having Kamala now shores them up considerably. My next strength is that she has room to grow, because the last poll I saw, it was either, goddamn, it's always in that 15 to 20% mark of the country really has no opinion on her. They don't know much about her. And over time, it's definitely conceivable that more of those undecided people can break for her side. She does have, at least as far as the right is concerned, some issues. I don't think a lot of those attacks are going to land. That'll be for the last part of the show. But because she has this kind of big unknown question mark around her, she's going to be introducing herself to large swaths of the electorate right now. And nailing a good first impression is going to let a lot of people come over to her side, and making sure that those undecideds see her in a good light is definitely going to be key in the coming weeks, because candidate like Donald Trump, no room to grow. This will be the third election that he is on the ballot. And by this time, everybody's made up their opinion on the man. There is no one out there left who doesn't know about him and who hasn't decided how they feel about him. Certainly a different case for Kamala. So her last strength, and I think is definitely the biggest one for her, and what could be definitely the key for her winning the election in November, is that she can draw in those very fickle suburban women. Have long been discussed really since 2016, where they showed themselves to be the largest cohort of swing voters left in the country. In 2016, they broke for Trump. In 2016, they broke for Biden. In 2020, with a woman like Kamala at the helm, she's able to articulate Democratic positions on abortion, as well as critique Republican ones on abortion. And this issue in particular happens to be kryptonite to suburban women. When in 2016, when the Republicans weren't running on issues like abortion, those women were a lot more pliable to the Republican side. Now in 2024, after the abolition of Roe v. Wade, I think those women are a lot less enthusiastic about the Republican Party, particularly with the current vice president they have. And I think that they will be much more enthusiastic towards Kamala. Again, we don't know what will happen. I guess it is possible that these women will break for Trump. I don't think so, but anything is possible come election day. So that wraps up our strengths, I think, for now. I could go on. I just don't want to belabor the point too much, and we'll go into the weaknesses. I just realized I'm not going to be able to send her this, but whatever. Her first weakness is, in my opinion, she's a charisma black hole, and this definitely gives her the impression of being more unlikable than she actually is. One of the things about Kamala is that she is not Hillary Clinton, and the Republicans are right now trying to drag out the Hillary Clinton attack book against her, and I really don't think it's going to work. And that's mainly because her unlikability isn't so much in terms of the shit she actually did and the potential crimes she actually committed. It's just that she's an awkward public speaker. Sometimes she doesn't flow very well. Sometimes she says things that are weird. There's been the meme going around, the unburdened by what has been. I don't know why I gave that a fucking southern accent for some reason. But anyway, the meme that Kamala says in every single one of her stump speeches. And the thing is, you can come up with these kind of political mashups for any single candidate, right? If you guys have been involved in any political campaign in your lifetimes, the one thing you will come to hate is the repetitiveness of your candidate's stump speech. To the audience that they're delivering it to, it sounds like it's the most amazing thing. It's this whole brand new thing that they've never heard before. For you, you've heard this speech a bazillion times. And now, especially in the digital era where you can go and film a candidate on the campaign trail and then just film their stump speech again and again, and then take and make a mashup of the candidate just saying the same crap over and over again. And the thing is, I don't actually think it's a bad line. I just think that a lot of the time she delivers it poorly and delivers it in a stilted manner. The fortunate thing about this issue with her is that I do think she can actually fix it. I do think if she takes the time to work on her speech patterns a little bit and beef up some of the language in her speeches, or in some cases maybe even beef down, right? Because to me, at least, the most successful left-wing candidates are the ones that are able to take some of the more academic ideas that are involved in left-wing ideology and distill it into a simple and catchy manner that people can glom onto. So yeah, in some cases, she might need to beef down her speech to get there. That being said, I think with the appropriate work, she can actually become much more likable on the campaign trail, because I think at her core, she's not an unlikable person. She's actually pretty positive, and she comes off as a much more positive person than someone like Joe Biden or Donald Trump. It's something that can be fixed, but she needs to take some serious time and energy to resolve it. Her next weakness is that she is starting from behind, not the place you ever necessarily want to be in. Joe Biden has dug her a substantial hole that she needs to dig herself out of. And that goes into, you know what, I'll just put in our third weakness. That is, she is joined to Biden's administration and the unpopularity of it. So because she's joined to that Biden administration, she's starting from a position behind in the polls. Not the place you want to be. So she has ground that she needs to make up, because the polls are showing right now that she's either tied with, probably on average, or slightly losing to Donald Trump. And as a Democratic candidate, you need to win the popular vote to really win the Electoral College. So she's got some ground to make up for sure. Next is she's got some skellies in the closet. That's skeletons. I couldn't fit it in one line. We're going to talk again more about this at the end of the show. People talk about, for example, she did some pretty blatant careerist moves to climb the ladder when she was younger. I don't think that those attacks are going to land. I think the bigger skeletons in her closet are stuff that can actually shake up her enthusiasm with the base. Right now, the base is by and large enthusiastic. But she does have some serious issues when it comes to people who are on the further left end of the spectrum, predominantly her record as the district attorney within California. She was known as actually being pretty hard on crime. She was known for a lot of kind of dicey deals, which ended up with people who are innocent actually being thrown in jail. And of course, there's the natural sort of distrust of people on the left for people who are in law enforcement. So if those skeletons end up coming out to play, it can shake that enthusiasm that the Democrats have built up so far right now is that she doesn't really have a vision or message for her campaign, and that's yet, because those things will arrive in time. But right now, she is still running on the anti-Donald Trump fumes, which can get you far. But personally, I think if you really want to guarantee the victory, you've got to go all the way and not just be the anti-Donald Trump candidate. You need to be the pro-people candidate and actually give people something that they want to vote for you for, something that they actually need that will improve their lives. If she can't come up with a reason, if she can't come up with a vision, she will be stuck with the anti-Donald Trump playbook, which can only get you so far. All right, so now let's wrap up the show by talking about the Republican response to what appears to be Vice President Harris becoming the likely Democratic nominee. And let's just say it hasn't been great. So I have seen so many crazy and unhinged attacks against Kamala Harris that really come from the online right. And this is something that putting Kamala in the position of power, being in the driver's seat, will definitely do. It will spur on the worst instincts of Republicans and make them have the most vile and hateful responses to their political opponent. And one of the things I always do is keep track of right-wing comments and what the people are saying. And, within the online sphere, they think they got it made, man. They think that they got the best, most slam dunk attacks against her, that, they're just going to totally dismantle her. But they don't understand how completely and totally sheltered within the online bubble those attacks are. And when you actually take them out to Normie and normal people and you start saying these things, they look at you like, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? You are a grace person. So yeah, as we can see here, Republican leaders are urging their colleagues to not use racist and sexist attacks against Kamala Harris. So it's really not going so great for them. They are definitely struggling to pivot to the new political reality, because Republicans really thought that this was going to be a slam dunk, no problem, we're going to wrap it up, take it home, landslide election. Now that's not the case. And one thing I do definitely want to make sure Democrats keep their heads on, because things aren't done yet by any stretch of the imagination. It's still a race. It's not a done deal on the Democratic side either, right? We are still looking at probably a 50-50 election right now. But it's clear that they had calibrated their political messaging, their ads, even their vice presidential pick to combat Joe Biden. And right now, everything has been upended for the Republican Party, and they are struggling to find new avenues of attack against Kamala Harris. And right now, their attacks are probably succeeding in energizing and making their base excited. But the moment these attacks get displayed to a wider audience of people, they revile in horror. So let's start with one of the biggest ones that they're running against Harris, which is that she is the DEI vice president. And for those of you who may not know, DEI stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. It's the shorthand in right-wing circles for wokeness. And for a very certain subset of people, when you say DEI, that triggers in their head, oh my God, this person's woke, wokeness bad, stay away from them. Most normal people haven't a clue what DEI means. And when you say she's the DEI vice president, most people think that you're like talking about who the fuck knows what, maybe some sort of national bank conglomerate, maybe some sort of political pack or political movement. Maybe it's short for a country somewhere. Most people probably have no fucking idea when you say DEI vice president what that means. And you can't really say, oh, she's the diversity, equity, inclusion vice president, because not only is that a fucking mouthful to say every single time, when you actually tell people what that means, it doesn't actually bring them to the cause, right? They're not like, oh, that's a bad thing. I will be against that. For this attack to land, for the DEI attack to land, you not only have to be part of the kind of right-wing online bubble, but you have to accept and internalize their rhetoric to actually understand it and for it to land and work for you. So yeah, they're basically saying like she doesn't deserve to have her job because she's a black person and there could have been a white person or someone else that could have done the job better. So I don't think we're going to see this form of attack stick around for very long. The next line of attack here is basically attacking Kamala on the grounds that she's a slut, like that she is promiscuous sexually and therefore she'd be a bad candidate. So we got here this Jackson Lemay here. I believe he's a Republican pastor or something, very conservative talking head. Says both Joe and the hoe gotta go. And of course, obviously referring to Kamala as a sexually promiscuous woman. This dates back to there was a time in her when she was, I believe she was in her late 20s, early 30s. She had an affair with, I believe it was the governor of California. Either way, some sort of political bigwig. And a lot of people say, well, this helped her get her foot in the door and climb the ladder and get a better position in her career. And truth be told, it probably did. But in the world of benign things that people have done, it's really tough for me to think of something more benign in 2024 than that. You're talking about like a 30-plus-year-old affair that most people don't remember or think about. And since then, there hasn't exactly been overwhelming evidence of this kind of behavior. And even if there was, I think at this point, most people really don't give a shit. They don't give a shit at all. And I feel the same way about this when it comes to Donald Trump and his sex life. About the whole Stormy Daniels thing, the overwhelming majority of people, they just don't give a shit. They just don't give a shit at all anymore. And it's not going to be a worthwhile line of attack. I don't think it was a worthwhile line of attack on the left against Donald Trump, and certainly not going to be worthwhile for the right against Kamala Harris, especially when we talked about before, those fickle suburban women. You want to get them on your side. I don't think calling her a slut is the way to do it, guys. And then this has been one of the most amazing attacks that has come out. You guys have probably seen this one already. This is Laura Loomer. This is, again, one of the most absolutely out to lunch, out there crazy people on the planet. One of these days, though, I would actually love to have a face-to-face conversation with her and see if I could ascertain how much of what she says she actually believes, or if it's all just like a bullshit show. Anyway, let's go into what she says here because it's pretty unhinged. She says, it's time for Republicans to start talking about at Kamala Harris's sexual history. Again, we talked about that before, how probably talking about politicians' sexual histories, not really the best line of attack now. This isn't the 1950s anymore. And talk about Kamala Harris's sexual history and the reason she likely doesn't have any children of her own. I'm willing to bet she's had so many abortions that she's damaged her uterus. A woman who has no biological children of her own should not be allowed to make decisions in the White House for your children. Republicans need to run with this messaging and ask why a woman with no kids and just her scarred up uterus is so obsessed with wanting to kill your babies. Kamala has no investment in the future, but she wants to determine our future. So again, nothing is going to repel those fickle suburban voters more than this kind of crap. Just pulling out of thin air, just pulling out of your ass that she has a scarred up uterus. Of course, this is just wild, right? Because first off, she's completely making this up. She has no idea why Kamala Harris has no biological kids of her own. You don't know if she just chose not to. Maybe she can't have kids for an otherwise legitimate reason, a personal medical reason that she wouldn't want to talk about. And if she had so many abortions that it scarred up her uterus, again, most people, I don't think, would really give a shit unless you're some sort of Bible-thumping conservative. And this is another weird Republican talking point that they are running with, that people without kids can't have a say in the future. They can't have political power. They can't be operating the levers of the country. It is a very bizarre line of attack because that means a guy like me, who is a communist, who is a socialist, who is far left, does have kids, has absolutely every single right to make decisions in this country. So yay me, you guys are giving me full reign, so thank you. this type of talking point doesn't engender me towards your side. It's not like this kind of talking point is like, yeah, those people without kids, they shouldn't be allowed to participate in society. Nobody thinks like that unless you're already a very selfish, demented person. So it isn't like this is going to bring over all the family people over to your side anyway, and it's just going to piss off all the people who don't have kids. And let's be real, there's a lot more people out there that don't have kids right now, and that number is increasing than those that do. So as a person with kids, I think that it would be the best thing for our future and our society and my kids' ability to live healthy and happy lives that we get Laura Loomer off the air. And because I have kids, you can't tell me what a bad idea that is, or disagree with me, or say that I'm wrong in any way. It's awesome. And the thing is, again, this works within their own echo chambers, within their own already online, already keyed in audience. So they get the perception that this is going to land with a larger group, with the public at large. It's not. It's really not. So let's move into a line of attack that might actually have some landing power. This is Kamala Harris's weakness, perceived weakness at the border. And this is really the Democratic Party, by and large's perceived weakness at the border. The Democrats have really let Republicans run away with the border narrative. And it's unfortunate because when it comes to the border, there are a lot of complex issues at play, and it's not like any administration can just snap their fingers and make everything okay. I think that the left and the Democrats have been extremely weak in warding off Republican attacks on the border. There are numerous things that I think they can do. One thing that I just wish that American administrations would do in general is start working with Mexico in regards to border issues, because a lot of the immigrants crossing the border are no longer coming from Mexico, because Mexico's actually doing pretty good these days. A lot of people aren't really racing to run over the border like they used to. These are migrants that are coming from Honduras, from Haiti, from Venezuela, from Colombia, from other Central American and South American states. And Mexico, by and large, really doesn't want to have these people moving through their country as much as America would. I think there's a lot of work that could be done between the two countries to actually resolve this issue, but it just never seems to happen. No one ever talks about it. But because the Democrats have been so weak and so flailing on the border, not able to consolidate their messaging, and the fact that Joe Biden has prescribed Kamala Harris as the border czar, the kind of head of the border crisis, or whatever you want to say, Republicans have jumped on this issue and used it to leverage whatever kind of political messaging they can out of it. I think this will be one of the more successful attacks. The other ones that I can see being successful is tying her to Joe Biden's administration and some of the unpopular weaknesses and failings of that administration. I think that those two probably are the best and most likely ways they can gain some traction. They may be able to gain some traction in certain states by playing her off as an extreme California liberal, but I think that would be a harder strategy to really work out. Anyway, with that, we're going to have to wrap this up here. I pretty much run out of time for today anyway. So the one thing I guess I just want to say is that I am very excited that at the very least, we're not going to get the Donald Trump, Joe Biden rematch of 2024 that it seemed like we were all heading towards. I'm just so happy it's not going to be the same exact thing as last time, because goddamn, that's just so boring. It's so boring. It's so pathetic and frustrating. At least we've got something different this time. And not only that, we've got a real political race on our hands. I think it's going to be pretty tight all the way up until Election Day. And it's not going to be like the steamroll cakewalk that everybody thought it was going to be. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up here. I want to thank you guys for watching. This has been the Comrade, signing off for now. And until next time, you guys take care.